Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports.
The business of sports can be intimidating or hard for a startup to break into.
We really appreciate when our owners are actually there, with us through the journey.
Teams, ours especially, have been very intentional to diversify at all levels of the company.
I think we're in the golden years for the NFL and college football.
Our demographic reach has continued to expand.
This is going to be really unlocking the streaming platform for sports fans.
Sports valuations are rising. We'll see when they peak.
You don't have to be the best in your sport to make a whole ton of money.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with special guest host, Bloomberg Originals sports correspondent Vanessa Perdomo. Scarlet Fu and Damian Sassower are on assignment. Coming up on the show, we talk racing. We will hear from James Vowles. He is the team principal for the Williams Racing Formula One team as we get ready for this week's US Grand Prix in Austin.
I've had the pleasure of being in the sport for about 30 years now. There is nothing like the last sort of 4 or 5 years where the sport has just really, really taken off globally, worldwide. It's an absolute pleasure to be a part of it this time. It's a pleasure to have sort of a fan base that is growing so tremendously. But more importantly, I think we have really good racing now.
We also speak with Jennifer Esptein, controlling owner of a brand new National Women's Soccer League club in Boston. We'll find out more about the new team and the league's growth. All that and more is straight ahead on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. But first, we want to check in on the college ranks as college athletes get closer to being able to be paid directly by their schools. For more on this and the changing college sports landscape, we bring in Jim Cavale. He is the founder and chairman of athletes.org, a nonprofit that organizes college athletes into their own players association broken down into chapters. Jim, welcome to the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
We're going to talk about college sports, and there's so much going on, and so I appreciate you guys taking some time out for the conversation.
Yeah, I don't know where to start. I mean, it is so much here. I mean, it's like, I guess I'm going to start with the elephant in the room with the latest developments on NIL. And they got a big boost, the college athletes, with what happened recently. Can you take us through that?
Yeah, the House settlement, which is a consolidation of multiple court cases by athletes against the NCAA and its schools for not having revenue shared with them, whether it's NIL or just broadcast revenue. Those cases have been consolidated into one settlement called the House settlement. And it basically takes 3 cases, House versus the NCAA, Hubbard versus the NCAA, and Carter versus the NCAA, which are all about that revenue sharing topic, and consolidates them into one. And it's been preliminarily approved by Judge Wilkin. And she, with her preliminary approval, is likely to approve it altogether on April 7th. And it will basically create a whole new system for college athletics that will start next summer, where schools will have an annual cap, $22 million is the initial cap per school, that they will be able to use to pay players. And it comes from their revenue. They're not getting the money from somewhere else, but they'll have to figure out, if they want to fully fund the $22 million cap, how they want to split it up per sport, how they want to split it up per athlete, what the contract's going to look like between them and the athlete, because the athlete will not be employee, won't have a salary on W-2. This will be an NIL deal, essentially, between the school and the athlete, instead of the outside NIL deals we've seen between, collectives of donors and athletes. And so it's going to change a lot. And that it's a 10-year deal. And so if the settlement gets fully approved on April 7th, this will be a system that's in place for 10 years, and the cap will go up a little bit every year. It could be as high as about $33 million by year 10. So this means that a big step, a transformational step, is being taken, where schools are finally going to share their gross revenue with their athletes to help produce it.
Now, that's definitely a landmark, and it'll change a lot of things, but obviously really beneficial to the athletes. But I want to talk about how it's going to, change the recruiting process, how it's going to change the way everything works. Because you said it's about $22 million that the schools will be able to lay out, but not every school will probably go up to that salary cap, right? So how do you think that's going to, we're already seeing, these big schools that have big boosters and collectives gaining more recruits or, taking them away from other schools because they say they can pay them more in NIL. So how is this going to change if not every school goes up to that $22 million cap?
There's a few points that this question kind of brings us to. Number one, about 70 schools will try to fully fund the $22 million. There's a little over 60 power conference schools right now, Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12. And then there's a handful of schools outside of the power conferences that want to still compete at that level. Schools like Washington State and Oregon State that are in the Pac-2 right now. And so those schools, I believe, those 70 or so schools will fully fund the $22 million, which means about $1.5 billion will be paid to athletes in the 2025-26 athletic year alone, which is awesome. But to your point, how are they going to fund it? Who's going to fund it easier than others? That's a really, really big question. Big Ten and SEC schools make $50 million more a year per school on their media deals than the Big 12 and ACC schools. So schools in the Big Ten and SEC are going to have a much easier time funding the $22 million than schools in the Big 12 and ACC will. And that's a real thing. And so what that means is, an SEC school probably will fully fund the $22 million. This will allow them to add scholarships for sports that they traditionally have not been able to, like a baseball or softball, where they want to have more full scholarships for athletes without any limitations. This settlement will allow for that. And so I expect a Big Ten or SEC school to not only fully fund the $22 million of revenue sharing, but to add scholarships for certain sports. Big 12 and ACC schools are going to be scraping and clawing to fund that $22 million. And they may even eliminate a sport or get rid of some scholarships to be able to afford the $22 million. So there's already going to be a stronger divide between the haves and the have-nots just within the power conferences with this. It's just a reality. Schools are going to have to figure out how to become more of a revenue-generating engine to be able to produce more revenue, afford the salaries of their coaches, their athletics administrators, and the facilities, while also now having $22 million to pay athletes. And the last thing I'll say is I expect those bigger schools in the SEC and Big Ten to also still have fully funded collectives that are still doing NIL deals outside of the $22 million. And those deals will become icing on the cake deals for athletes to get on top of the revenue sharing they're getting from the schools. So yeah, it's going to be a literal dichotomy of haves and have-nots just in the power conferences with this.
Can you imagine this in college football back in my old day with Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes going through this? I just can't imagine the old schoolers accepting this, and I think maybe that's why Nick Saban said, hey, I've had enough of Alabama.
Well, Nick Saban had a comment in 2023 at the spring meetings for the Southeastern Conference for the SEC. They were down in Destin, Florida. And Nick Saban's opening statement, he went off on the fact that if we're going to do this NIL thing, we need to do it all the way. We need to structure it. We need to have a collective bargaining agreement between the athletes and their schools. We need to regulate the transfer portal to create a reformation of commitment between the athletes and the schools. And that commitment can be tied to what they get paid. And, he said a lot of things that more and more people, including us at athletes.org, have continued to champion over time. Joe Klatt just interviewed James Franklin, the head coach of Penn State, for Big Noon Saturday a few weeks ago, and James Franklin talked about it. Jim Harbaugh championed it multiple times during the season, including in the press conference right after they won the national championship of the CFP. So we need structure. This system needs structure. Fans are frustrated with the transfer portal. Fans are now feeling like athletes are greedy. Fans are feeling like athletes are not loyal. What fans have to understand is this is not the fault of the athlete. The athlete is just taking advantage of a system that is not structured. And once it's structured and the athletes actually have a seat at the table, you can negotiate as athletes with your school what the minimum salary is, what the maximum salary is, what free agency or the transfer portal looks like. But until you involve the athletes in that negotiation, you're going to continue to have more lawsuits. And the Department of Justice is the reason we don't have transfer rules and we have a transfer portal. And they said you cannot treat non-employees with non-competes. And that's what college athletics has done for a long time with the transfer rules, which are now gone. So this is not the athlete's fault. This is a lack of leadership and forward thinking from the leaders in college athletics.
I want to get your reaction to a story that happened last month of UNLV quarterback Matthew Sluka. And he left the team because of an unfulfilled $100,000 payment for transferring to the program. Your thoughts about all of this that's going on in that drama?
In my last year as CEO at Influencer and Teamworks, I was asked to speak at a lot of meetings with athletic directors and commissioners. And they wanted to hear the data around what was actually happening with NIL, because we had hundreds of millions of dollars of NIL payment data in our software system. And so I would go present and I would basically say, hey guys, here's what's really happening. Your donors are laundering money in these shell companies that are associated with your school. They're called collectives. I'm sure you're familiar with them. And NIL is being used to pay your players outside of the school. And these court cases are going on. Eventually, you're going to be forced to revenue share directly. But without the structure of you sharing revenue directly, you don't have transparency. You don't have structure, rules, a system that can be governed. And that's why you need to collectively negotiate with your athletes. And you can imagine some of the reactions I'd get when I give that talk. But that brings me to Sluka. And he is one of thousands of athletes that are getting these collective deals in the transfer portal, told to them by a coach, who then goes to a collective, which is a shell company associated with the school, funded by donor money. And then the coach, tells the collective, hey, we promised this player X. We need to make sure you put a contract together and pay him. It's not a structured system. A lot of athletes are in Sluka's position. He just had leverage and the ability to use his last year of eligibility if he stopped playing games this year, because he can use a red shirt. And he did it. And that's the system we're in. Athletes are taking advantage of the system we're in. And there's a lot of great stories from it. Dalton Knecht is a lottery pick for the Lakers this year. And he started in JUCO and then played for Northern Colorado and then went to Tennessee and became a star. That's a great story of the transfer portal. But there's also a lot of tough stories of the transfer portal where young athletes continue to transfer every year. Some of them don't graduate. Some things don't pan out for them. Some of them don't get money that was promised to them by collectives, and nobody is governing it. And that's why this house settlement system is a step forward. But I don't think it's the full step forward unless you have a collectively negotiated agreement between the athletes and the schools. That's how you protect Sluka. You have a standard contract that all collectives or agents or anyone on the outside has to use. You have a standard set of agreements that are transparent. There is guaranteed money, etc.
Our thanks to Jim Cavale, founder and chairman of athletes.org. Up next, we head to Boston and find out about the newest National Women's Soccer League club. For Vanessa Perdomo, I'm Michael Barr. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports show, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with Bloomberg Originals sports correspondent Vanessa Perdomo. She is in for Scarlet and Damian Sassower this week. That's right, she's handling for two. Boston is getting a brand new team to root for. The National Women's Soccer League is adding BOS Nation FC. For more, we're happy to have Jennifer Esptein with us. She's controlling owner of the new club. Jennifer, welcome to the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Hello there. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, let's start with that. First of all, you are part of the expansion, and it's big news for the NWSL. Can you tell us about it and, what it's like now that you're part of this league?
Well, it's great news for America, right? That Boston has another professional sports team. And
we're in New York, I don't know.
I mean, there could be sarcasm there for some, depends how you intend it. But we are just launching BOS Nation Football Club and just put out there our new visual and brand identity. And I might take a moment to tell you about that. When we thought about naming this team, we started with the word Bostonian. It's 9 letters that mean so much to those of us that live there. And when you rearrange those same 9 letters, it's an anagram, you get to the words of our name, BOS Nation. And that was really the essence, because we're a team whose identity is about our community of diverse fans who make up our strong city and love the world's beautiful game, or they will soon love the world's beautiful game if they do not already. So yeah, and we are thrilled to be joining the NWSL to take the pitch in March of 2026.
Jennifer, it's such an interesting way that you came about that name, and BOS Nation FC it's very different than a lot of other, let's say, plainly named soccer clubs out there. How did you come up with that? I mean, was there an outside marketing company that was consulted? Because this is obviously branded, it's not just a city name. There's obviously very much intention behind that.
So, one of my partners, we are unique in professional sports. Our core ownership are all female, and my partners are Anna Palmer and Amy Kwan Danoff and Stephanie Connaughton. And Stephanie Connaughton is a marketer. She worked for many, many years at Gillette, one of the original minds behind the Venus razor, and she spearheaded our branding efforts. And we worked with a local ad agency, Colossus, named Small Agency of the Year, actually, just recently by Adweek. So, we, as an ownership group, we are Bostonians first and foremost, and we are deeply connected in the market. And when we thought about naming this team, we want a name that that reflects our market. And we intentionally hired this branding firm that also is within our market. And if you live in Boston, you think of Red Sox Nation or Pats Nation. And so, this was, again, fan first. We are looking to build this team embedded in the fabric of the community and put our fans first. And so then, that was the name and the whole visual brand alongside it. We have some, a great palette of colors. The primary colors are, we've called them championship green and relentless raspberry and loyal charcoal, which is essentially a great green and raspberry and black, and some additional colors, orange press and yellow and white. And we think that, that palette also reflects the diversity of our majority minority city and the global population that we hope fill our stadium.
You guys kick off your inaugural season 2026. You will be the 15th franchise in the National Women's Soccer League. It's not going to stay at 15 for long because this thing is growing and growing and growing. To give you an example, even with the valuations, Angel City has been valued at $250 million. And that's now. I'm just thinking, what kind of future are you looking for the valuation of your team? And tell us about, it's nice to see that, it ain't cheap anymore.
Well, you're right. There's an incredible flywheel in motion when it comes to the growth of women's sports. I'm sure you've seen some of the data that women's sports are expected to generate $1.3 billion in 2024 global revenues, 300% higher than in previous market estimates. The NWSL is in the first year of a landmark new media deal that is, 40 times higher than the previous one. And you probably heard the announcement of the WNBA's $200 million a year media deal also. So, there is women's sports, is on the rise, record-breaking attendance, record-breaking viewership. It's not a moment, it's a movement. And, in Boston, we hope to be a top-performing team on many levels, first and foremost in the depth of our impact in the community, but in ticket sales, in sponsorship revenues, fan engagement, merch sales, and of course, our performance on the field.
You talked about, being one of the teams in this city, and obviously Boston's this incredibly iconic sports city. Is there an advantage to knowing there's so much sports history and obviously fans there, or is there some disadvantages of now being a seventh team added into this saturated market?
I mean, I would not call it a saturated market. I think, in Boston, we are a town united by our legions of sports teams. We're a place where no one rests until championship banners are raised. I think we have some of the most passionate fans in all of professional sports. So I think in Boston, there's always room for teams that are, competing at a high level. We're going to bring in some of the best athletes, in the world, in the sport, into our market. That's what we're looking to do. And, in our initial data also demonstrates that Boston has a passionate and vibrant soccer community. We will be the soccer team in the city. 45% of the population identify as fans of soccer. And our data also shows that, our market has significantly above national average interest in women's sports, and specifically women's soccer, up 23% to the national. So I think it shows that there's an enthusiasm for the sport. There's an enthusiasm for women's sports. There's a gap in the market around women's soccer, and we're here to fill that gap.
How are you guys doing with media rights? Those are two words that a lot of broadcasters are like, okay, how much are we going to pay for this league and that league? Do you have any insight to the media rights and what's going on with your team?
Well, so there's, I mentioned already that we're in the first year of the league is in first year of a 4-year deal, $240 million, 40x from the previous deal, and spread across 4 different networks to increase reach and visibility. There's been tremendous growth. The national broadcast viewership is up 95%. So this is year 1, and with our record-breaking attendance and viewership, I would only anticipate that the next national media deal, is even bigger and better. So we're excited for where we are now, and we'll certainly learn. We have interest from our local media partners also, and we're early on right now in Boston, but we're about to have meetings with a couple of the local media partners that are interested in what we're doing and what we're building, and being a partner with respect to our games.
That's more what I was trying to get at about the regional sports networks, because that's becoming old hat now. And I was talking more, do you have any idea about the future of streaming for you guys, or where are you going with that?
I don't have a fully expansive answer to that question. It's a really important one, and building up the team side expertise to help us think through that very carefully. We're a lean team right now. We are close to announcing, our top hire in the sporting side, and I hope alongside that very soon the top hire on the business side, and we'll grow the team underneath them. I know from my involvement with the Celtics, part of that ownership group as well for over 20 years, and certainly have talked to their media partner who's expressed interest, and so we're going to build our relationships and see what we can do.
Jennifer, talking about building out your team, the front office, and then eventually the players. I mean, you guys announced that you had the bid last year in 2023. You don't kick off until 2026. This is a little bit longer of a leeway than we've seen, and I've spoken to other teams that came on a little bit quick, and they wish they had a longer leeway. Do you feel like it's great to have this much time, or are you just stoked to finally see them out there playing eventually?
Well, I certainly cannot wait to see our team playing, but I already feel like it's not we need all the time we can get. We'll just say that. I mean, because
still not enough time.
We're also in a partnership, a public-private community partnership with the city of Boston. We have a pioneering first of its kind stadium model where we are going to be playing in the heart of the city, renovating White Stadium in Franklin Park. It will be the first facility in the nation to house both a pro sports team and a public schools athletic programs. So we've got a lot to do to turn White Stadium into a state-of-the-art, top-tier facility for our players and create the fan experience that our fans in Boston are used to. So it's not just about building the team, it's also about building the facilities. And we're also going to be building a practice facility. So we have a lot of work ahead.
Yeah, and we're running out of time, but you are right, because that's going to be a state-of-the-art natural grass facility, and that's not easy at all, Jennifer.
That is true. But we are have a great team in place from our design partners, and we are working with the Legends Project Development Group, who did the Kansas City Current Stadium, providing project management services And so, yeah, it's going to be a beautiful state-of-the-art stadium, grass field. And, we think our market and our facilities will attract players that want to play in Boston. And, and this model really allows our team to have impact, not just the 20 or so home game days, but 365 days of the year.
Special thanks to Jennifer Esptein for joining us. She is controlling owner of the newly announced BOS Nation FC, Boston's new women's soccer league club. Up next on the show, we turn to racing and look ahead to this weekend's United States Grand Prix with James Vowles, team principal for the Williams Racing F1 team. For Vanessa Perdomo, I'm Michael Barr. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with special guest host Vanessa Perdomo, sports correspondent for Bloomberg Originals. Scarlet and Damian Sassower are both on assignment. Time now for us to talk some racing. The US Grand Prix is this weekend. To get us ready for that race hitting Austin, Texas, plus talk about F1's growth, we are happy to welcome James Vowles. He is team principal for Williams Racing. Plus, joining us for the conversation is Bloomberg Pursuits auto columnist Hannah Elliot. James, welcome to the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Wow, that is an entry and a half. Thank you so much. Hopefully I'll do at least half of it justice today. Thank you for that.
Man, F1, now I'm going back to the old Jackie Stewart days, F1, which was big then. But now F1 is off the charts, James. Can you talk about the growth?
I've had the pleasure of being in the sport for about 30 years now. There is nothing like the last sort of 4 or 5 years where the sport has just really, really taken off globally, worldwide. It's an absolute pleasure to be a part of it at this time. It's a pleasure to have sort of a fan base that is growing so tremendously. But more importantly, I think we have really good racing now. I mean, take this year's championship.
Yeah.
No one can predict who's going to win, drivers or constructors. I can't tell you. It's going to be a surprise in Abu Dhabi when it happens. And no one can tell you who's going to finish 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. It's still all up in the air. And that's what it should be. It should be this fierce competition where you have gladiators duking it out on track without anyone being able to predict what's going to happen in the future. And in terms of growth, I mean, I remember just about 10 years ago in the US, for example, we had one race. And even then, we didn't do a very good job at all. That's on us. That's on our heads. But in the last sort of 3-4 years, certainly 5 years, we've gone from one race to 3 races. And by the way, all 3 of them are what I would call pinnacle races. They're the very top of what you can achieve in Formula One between Miami, Austin, which is what we have right now, and Las Vegas. They're all different as well to each other. We have a fan base that's 44 million, and that's a large fan base. But the impressive thing is that's doubled in the last 5 years. So effectively, we have this huge growth that's taking place. And I'm only talking about the US market at the moment. And it's exciting times. I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that, James, for sure. About, last year it seemed like everyone was talking about Vegas. It was the big talk, them coming back onto the circuit and just this overall like super hype for it and having the 3 races in the US. Do you think it's warranted to have that many races here? And do you feel like Vegas lived up to the hype last year?
So first, do I think it's warranted? 100%. If any one of these 3 events wasn't just filled to capacity, then you'd put a debate on it. They're not. It's quite the contrary. If I had to sort of speak to our partners, these 3 races are the key events for all of them, irrespective of what market they're from. And so I think it's absolutely the right number, and it's the right spread across the USA as well at the same time, covering all elements of it. In terms of Vegas itself, it was, the best way I can put it to you is it was a spectacle, one I will never forget. It was extraordinary. There are some races that are just about It can be about the circuit or it can be about the city. Vegas was a show beyond anything I've seen ever in the sport, and in a good way, not in a bad way at all. But it's carved out its own niche, its own way of operating, its own element. And no, I absolutely think it's deserving of its place in the calendar.
James, I'm really curious, we're talking about the growth of the sport in the US. And of course, there's also been a lot of talk about expanding the series to new entrants. And I know you've said before you're totally open to having new teams potentially, but you do want to make the sport sustainable for the 10 teams that are in the race. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean when you say that?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll take Williams very specifically. Williams is an organization with great success in its history, second most successful team in Formula One. We've obviously been around for a few years, which has allowed us time to do that. But only Ferrari has more championships than Williams does in the sport.
Wow.
So that gives you a really good grounding as to where Williams is and why, by the way, I left the comfort of Mercedes that won everything. We won everything for 8 years. Why I came here. It's because you get an opportunity to take a team with such a heritage back to the front. There's a but to it. For about 20 years, Williams didn't have the investment required into it. As the sport effectively was moving and changing, these teams required you to have investors that were prepared to lose money, a lot of money. And where we are today is I'm really fortunate with Dalton that they understand what the journey's about. They understand this is a journey about taking a team with the huge presence that Williams has back to the front of the grid. There's a but to it. They're investing hundreds of millions a year, more than any other team on the grid. It's a very serious proposition, but our bottom line does not look healthy at the moment. It won't do. You have to treat it like a startup where we have to put in a tremendous amount for this to be successful in the future. Today, and this is a great thing with the sport, we're in a cost cap. So explain the cost cap first and foremost. There's sort of two elements to it, but the really important one is we can only spend 145 million US on effectively building the cars and operating the cars. And that's a really good thing. I think it's brought the teams closer together, but it's now made it into a business. So finally, I know there's an end stop to how much I can spend and an end stop to how much others can spend as well at the same time. We're still very negative. So we're putting in, as I said, about 100 million or so. Our accounts came out recently, and you'll see those numbers. And by any standard of any company in the world, that's enormous. But there's some good news. The top teams, the top one or two, are now at break even to slightly profitable because the cost cap's limited what they can spend, and sponsorship partners and even the business is growing enough that allows them to be in that position. And what I've said and what I think is the right direction of travel is just give us a moment while we get all 10 teams up to a position where we're not necessarily making profit, but it's just financially stable. Because it's the first time in a long, long time where we're not questioning whether one of the teams will disappear next year. Because it's investment at a high level required for 8 of the teams on the grid. And at that point, then growth absolutely should be on the radar. We're just not quite there yet.
There is some promising news about the continuous growth of Formula One. Years ago, Toyota withdrew, and now they're coming back. I want to explain, though. They're coming back as a technical partnership with Haas F1 Racing. Is that going to expand maybe to not just Haas, maybe to you guys and other teams down the line?
I think Toyota will probably put focus on one organization. It's very rare for an OEM to spread themselves across multiple. So you summarized it well, actually. This goes into really well with what I was saying before. I was a part of Honda back in 2008, where we had the financial crisis, and that's where Toyota and Honda stopped overnight. Literally from one day to the next, I lost my job. I'm glad Toyota coming back in. I think it shows you the strength that the business now has. And what Toyota have realized is we don't have to do this by calling the team Toyota. What we need to do is just bring in our technical expertise to an organization, which is Haas in the circumstance, and allow us to use some of the faculty, some of the experience, some of the organization that we have to make it stronger. That is great for the sport. And I don't think you've seen the end of OEMs joining. I think there's a few other OEMs on the sidelines that want to come in a similar way.
Absolutely. And James, you spoke with Bloomberg earlier, and, you kind of alluded to the fact that, or not alluded, you said that you guys are really focused on the future and looking forward to these new regulations in 2026. Can you tell us why, you're so focused on the future and what you think those new regulations are going to do for Williams Racing?
Yeah, definitely. First, it doesn't mean we're gonna fall back in 24, 25. Not at all. We're investing significantly, and we have some low-hanging fruit to still pick up on performance. But 2026 is the largest regulation change since I've been in the sport in 30 years. We've never changed the power unit and the chassis to this level in 1 year before. It's a complete shake-up of everything we've known and everything we will know in the future. And it's a good thing. It creates opportunity. In 2025, I think you're going to see one of the best championships we've seen for a while, because you're going to have McLaren, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, all fighting for that championship. And you can't let go. I've been in that position before. When you're fighting for a championship, you've got to fight tooth and nail. You've got to invest into it. And that creates opportunity for me. It creates opportunity because in 2026, I can put our money in basically making sure that our car is in the wind tunnel before anyone else's, that we develop it before anyone else's, that we put our time, resource, and effort into it. Because it's a clean slate. From an engineering perspective, I can throw out what we've done for the last 4 or 5 years and focus on the future, which is exactly what we're doing now. So if I give you a sort of construct of our team, it's about 1,000 people, but we've got around about 300 of those today, with 2024, working on that 26 car.
James, I'm really curious. You're speaking about engineering and technology, of course, but I'm also curious about brain power. And I'm thinking of Adrian Newey, of course, leaving Red Bull, going to Aston Martin. Obviously, you're, a bit of an arm's length away from that. But how much can one person potentially change an organization? Just in general, and really, where are you looking for talent in people as you build the team for the future? So,
starting with Adrian, you don't get more successful than him in the sport. I have a good number of championships under my belt. He trounces me by a long way. He's an exceptional individual, an exceptional character. And I had the privilege really of spending nearly a full day with him, actually. We both went to Wimbledon at the same time, coincidence, but we caught up on the day. And I think the conclusion really that I came to at the time was any team would be fortunate to have him, full stop. In the case of Williams, we have so much foundation work that we need to do before someone of his caliber would make a substantial difference. And I didn't want to bring in someone that would be frustrated, in fact, by that. Williams he's got some incredible people that work day and night. If you ask them to do something, they'll give up everything for you. That they're driven by that, but we don't have the infrastructure in place at the moment that delivers on the back end of that. In the case of one person, answering your question, I personally believe that the sport has changed. We're not in a situation anymore where one person is the difference between winning or losing. It is about 1,000 people pointing the right way and working together. Now, leadership can obviously point people the right way, but the point I'm trying to make is it's not about one individual anymore. It's about 100 to 500 working together in harmony, synced up. And that's how you get not just success in 1 year, but continued success across many, many years.
Our thanks to Williams Racing Team Principal James Vowles for joining us, plus a special thank you to both Bloomberg Pursuits auto columnist Hannah Elliot and Bloomberg Originals sports correspondent Vanessa Perdomo for guest hosting today. And, of course, thank you for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. We are here each and every week at the same time, plus wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Michael Barr. Tune in again next week for the latest on the stories moving big old money in the world of sports. You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports, Bloomberg Radio around the world.